Hi, I'm Genevieve Gordon, a senior in English and Sociology here at USAO, and my project is called Masked Meanings: Uncovering the Rhetorical and Symbolic Role of a Face Covering in Anti-Mask Discourse. As anyone paying attention to the current events at all could tell, the COVID-19 pandemic has unleashed a slew of anti-mask protests across the country, as well as a general failure of many legislators to impose mask mandates despite considerable scientific evidence. My project looks at the various rhetorical arguments from the anti-mask movement and attempts to answer the big question, why are masks so controversial and how did they become such political objects in the public sphere? One way that I try to answer this question is through Stasis Theory, the ancient Greek rhetorical method of determining the specific point in an issue where the two sides are fundamentally disagreeing, or the point of stasis. To achieve stasis, we ask a progressive series of question categories, or stases, about the issue or event at hand. We start with questions of fact, does it exist? Then questions of definition, what are its characteristics? Then questions of quality, is it good or bad, harmful or not? And then questions of policy, what can or should be done about it? I argue that one of the reasons that mask discourse is so controversial and so unproductive is because the different sides of the issue are operating in different stasis categories, or they're asking entirely different questions. Pro-maskers are focusing on how to legislate mask mandates, the fourth stasis of policy, whereas anti-maskers are still arguing about the scientific merits of the mask, the third stasis, or they're trying to redefine the mask altogether as a political symbol, the definition stasis. My project attempts to account for both of these anti-mask strategies using the separate frameworks of science rhetoric and visual rhetoric. First, I'll talk about how anti-maskers are engaging with the science of face masks, trying to answer questions about whether or not they work or whether or not they're harmful. A key idea here is rhetorician Leah Ceccarelli's work on manufactured scientific controversy. A controversy is manufactured in the public sphere, she writes, when an arguer announces there is ongoing debate in the technical sphere about a matter for which there is actually overwhelming scientific consensus. These controversies, like climate change or evolution, are usually maintained by rhetorical appeals to fairness, artificial symmetry, and censorship fears. For anti-maskers, these strategies allow them to engage with the quality stasis and make a scientific judgment without dealing with any actual concrete scientific information. For example, I have a quote here from one anti-mask protester who says in an interview, "The only science that we can hear is what Big Pharma wants to put out there. There's other scientists and doctors that are going against this, but they're being censored on big tech, on big media, and that's the problem." Another way anti-maskers are approaching the science of masking is through the introduction of false information about mask-related health risks. One example is a popular anti-mask Facebook post that claims masks cause cancer by depriving their wearers of oxygen. Even though this has been disproven, these types of arguments lean heavily on scientific and medical jargon like hypoxia or alkaline, as well as quotes from established scientists to lend their arguments a sense of credibility. This example's use of Dr. Warburg, a Nobel Prize winner who has been dead for decades, helps the anti-maskers present themselves as defenders of a real truth that is being silenced. Now I want to move on to a second category of anti-mask arguments, which involves using the second stasis of definition to transform the mask into a political or ideological symbol rather than just a medical object, using visual rhetoric. According to the Rhetoric of the Image by Roland Barthes, all images have connotative meanings that change based on the different kinds of knowledge, practical, national, cultural, aesthetic, invested in the image. Because the image of the face mask is so new to our social awareness, it lacks a stable pre-COVID meaning in American culture. This provides an opportunity for both sides of the mask debate to turn the mask into an ideological symbol, and doing so makes an argument about its essential characteristics, or a redefinition. This symbolizing often happens through a device called rhetorical homology, where the similarities in the form of two things allow someone to make an argument that their content, or their purpose or function, is likewise similar. This leads to the frequent visual comparison of masks to objects like muzzles or burqas. Because all three of these objects cover the mouth, anti-maskers use this as a way to argue that masks are just as oppressive as the other objects to individual rights. Overall, this imbues the mask with a quality of visual authoritarianicity, where masks seem like representations of oppression, not because they really are, but because they tap into our cultural visual shortcuts for authoritarianism, leaning on other ideological factors like Islamophobia in the process. Overall, using the lens of stasis theory on anti-mask discourse helps us better understand how and why our conversations about masks are breaking down, as well as the ways that the face mask is operating within American cultural rhetoric in general. Understanding anti-mask rhetorical strategies has big implications on scientific communication and policy, and part of that means understanding that the mask has an inherent symbolic potency, and it might not ever be just science as much as we might want it to. That being said, pro-mask arguers might find this type of symbolizing useful in constructing media and arguments to encourage mask usage in the public. Maybe instead of it being a symbol of authoritarianism or oppression, we can help make the mask a symbol of patriotism or community well-being, and perhaps save lives in the process. I'm Genevieve Gordon, and this has been the USAO Student Showcase.